Is adultery a capital offense? The rational part of my brain knows that it's not. However, if I had my pistol in my hand when I saw my wife and her lover enter the hotel room, it very well could have been. Thankfully, by the time I got to my truck, I had calmed down and only glanced at the center console where I kept it. I have large sums of cash periodically for my work, and I keep a .357 in the truck just in case. I have only ever fired it at the gun range, but I like guns and have the right to keep them, so why not? I called my boss and told him the story. I would be taking the rest of the day off and probably tomorrow. I needed to line up a lawyer and establish a game plan. I withdrew $3,000 out of our account and opened a new one in my name only. That still left $5,000 in there, so we had enough to make this month's rent and bills. We only had the one credit card for emergencies, so I called and canceled it. We had switched our lease to month, so there was no house to worry about. No kids either. There was no way I was going to forgive her, especially since I had found out this was the fourth or fifth time. At least it was the fourth time she had charged a room to the credit card. I looked up the account online and saw the charges, then saw where she had transferred money from the bank account to cover it. As long as there was nothing owed on the card at the end of the billing cycle, we wouldn't get a paper statement. The emails about the account went to her, so if I hadn't taken the time to check, I would never have known. It's funny, if there hadn't been a glitch that stopped my debit card from working yesterday, I would never have checked our balance. If I hadn't checked our balance, I would have never seen the credit card payment. If I hadn't seen the credit card payment, I wouldn't have checked the charges yesterday. If I hadn't checked the charges, I wouldn't have known to be at the hotel today. If I hadn't been at the hotel today, I wouldn't be divorcing my cheating bitch of a wife. I know I should have said something last night, but my mind was still trying to process the fact that she could be stepping out. Now I had proof, and it was time to take action. I checked online and found a lawyer that said they specialized in divorces. I told them the story and was pleasantly surprised. We had only been married for 4 years, so I could probably get away with minimal spousal support. She had been working for 6 months at a job that paid well, which was why we went month to month on the lease. We wanted to buy a house. At least I thought we did. Who knew what was going through her head anymore? After I got done with all of that, I went home and grabbed a beer. Then it finally hit me. I love the dumb bitch. Why would she do this to me? What did I do wrong? I realized that if I sat around, I would just wallow in self-pity, so I grabbed some tape and started walking through the house putting tape on things I wanted. Basically, my game systems, the TV, and the exercise equipment. Other than that, everything was tied to a memory we shared, and it was just too painful. As I was wandering around, I started dreaming up creative ways to get back at them. When I got to leaving her trapped in a snowbound cabin with no food or clothes and breaking his legs in the wilderness so the scavengers would get him, I realized I might be going over the top, especially when I added the thought of giving him a gun with one bullet in it and have it be a dud, so when he worked up the courage to shoot himself, he heard the click. Yeah, I went there. Then I realized that things don't always work out so nice as they do in the stories, so I was better off divorcing the bitch and moving on. I was sad because I thought Gwen was going to be the woman would grow old and have children with. It seems like every memory came rushing back. My proposal at the theater where we met for the first time on a blind date. The 3-day weekend at Myrtle Beach. Sitting with her when her dad was dying of cancer. The long talk about the decision to move away from our friends so I could take this job. Our wedding night and the proud look on her face when she deep-throated me for the first time. How we cuddled and had a sex marathon for those 2 days the power went out during a winter storm. All of those memories were now overlaid with the image of her laughing and holding some shithead's hand while they kissed and opened up a hotel room door. My reverie was broken by the sound of the door opening. "Julian, what are you doing home?" she asked as she ran up to me to give me a hug. I put the sofa between us and just stared at her. There was nothing indicating that she had been screwing someone else today, but that wasn't surprising. "Cut the shit, Gwen. I know you have been screwing one of your guys from work, so I would suggest you start going through and putting a tag on what you want. You will be served with divorce papers on Wednesday." Her reaction was unexpected. She almost looked relieved. "I am very sorry, Julian. I should have never gone behind your back. You deserve the truth," she said quietly. "Sorry you cheated, or sorry you got caught?" I asked bitterly. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was unhappy. I'm sorry that I was too chicken shit to ask for a divorce a couple months ago when I decided I wanted out. You deserved so much more from me," she said with her eyes filling up with tears. "You have been screwing him for a couple months?" I couldn't help that my voice got louder. I was so angry and hurt. "No, we've only hooked up 5 times over the last couple weeks," she sighed. "But I have wanted out of the marriage for the last 6 months." "What? Why?" I asked. My world seemed to have shifted 5 degrees off center. Because I'm 25 years old and I don't want to have to come home at 10 o'clock if I'm having fun with my friends. I don't want to have to worry about having too much to drink and possibly offending your boss at a Christmas party. If I see a pair of shoes I don't need and can't afford, I want to be able to buy them without feeling like I'm taking money out of our future kids' college fund, she responded, with some heat. So, you decide you want to stop being an adult. You want to go back to your carefree early 20s. Well, you got it. I took half of our savings. I'm removing my name off the lease tomorrow. I took an extra $75 out to pay for a STD test. We screwed last Sunday, and I am sure you had been with him before that. I can't count on you to care enough about me to have him wear a condom. You want your freedom. You got it. Enjoy life with your new friends and your new job. As much as I was trying to remain calm, I couldn't help but raise my voice in anger. Yes, Jules, when we got married, I was barely able to drink legally. There's a lot of life out there that we both missed. At the time I thought I was okay with it. Now I'm not so sure. Going out with Jeremy and his friends reminded me of the fun times we used to have, just hanging out and being a little young and stupid, she said rather defensively. What part of missing out on life involves you cheating on me? What part of missing out on life makes it okay for you to have sex with someone else while still married? I thought that if nothing else we are still friends. Friends don't betray each other like that. You really are a piece of work, you know that? I thought my mom and sister were just bad examples, but apparently all women are nothing but bitches. Okay, I had to stop yelling. Gwen went to bed as I brought up my mom and sister. Mom's cheating had driven my father out the door and into a bottle. 2 years after he left, I found him dead of alcohol poisoning when I went over to his place for the weekend. Mom was only pissed that the child support check stopped coming. What little dad had left went to my sister and me, which my mom took and spent on a new set of tits and a tummy tuck. She put my sister Adrienne on birth control and told her that if she was going to get knocked up, to get pregnant by a rich kid so she would be set. Adrienne managed to seduce Tony Winger, the son of Arnold Winger who owned Winger Auto Sales. When she was 18, she turned up pregnant. Tony heard rumors and had her get a DNA test done while the baby was still in the womb. It turns out he wasn't the father and he dumped her. She went to a back alley abortion clinic to take care of the problem and caught a blood infection. She went into septic shock 2 days afterward and died at home. Mom tried to sue the doctor, but apparently my sister had signed forms that would have made it really expensive to pursue legal recourse. When she found out it would cost upwards of 10 grand to attempt to get any money, Mom dropped the whole thing. The next year was a living hell for me as I tried to finish school with good enough grades to maybe get a partial scholarship and deal with the men Mom would bring home. I saw the college dorms as a lifesaver. No way it could be worse than home. A month into college life, and I got a visit from 2 local cops. They pulled me out of class and told me that my mother had been killed in a car accident. Apparently, she and her boss were having a mid-afternoon tryst, and they were confronted by his angry, gun-wielding wife. They hopped in his car and sped away right into the grill of a garbage truck. It seems the cocaine and booze in his system didn't allow for the greatest control of a vehicle. I managed to get most of my money back from the college for the semester as I had to withdraw to take care of matters. As trashed as it was, we did have a paid-for house. Mom had a car, and surprisingly, she had a 401k that had almost $100,000 in it. There was a savings account with $4,300 in it. I also found a stash of DVDs and cash. The DVDs were labeled Retirement. Against my better judgment, I popped one in and saw what was obviously a hidden recording of my mom screwing some guy. The cash was almost $9,000. I was totally not surprised. I spent the month cleaning and doing paperwork. I had a couple guys come by to pay their respects. I didn't watch the videos, but I assumed at least some of them were the guys on the tape. I sold the house, put the cash in the bank, and went back to the winter semester. I lived as frugal as I could and did nothing but schoolwork. I had a few girls that would call me up when they wanted to get laid, and I was more than happy to park my Johnny in a warm hole for a little bit. I was not impressed with the female of our species. They were good for having fun with, but letting them get to clothes was just a pain in the butt. I graduated in the top 25 of my class and found work as a manager for a up-and-coming construction company. I went out to the bar with a bunch of the guys, and that led to a bunch of girls coming out with us. My attitude had mellowed to the point that I thought, just maybe there was a decent woman out there. I thought I had hit the jackpot when I met Gwen on a blind date. I was a couple years older than her, but she seemed pretty cool. The ink was still wet on her accounting degree, but she had found a decent job working for the state police in forensics. I thought I had the life. Turns out all women are scum. Gwen was beginning to really tear up now. That pissed me right off. She decides she wants out of our marriage, stabs me in the back, screws some other guy, and she feels bad? Hell no. I literally felt something rip inside me. I just suddenly didn't care. You will be served on Wednesday at noon at work. I have marked what I want to take from the apartment. The items will be gone tomorrow. You keep your car and I will keep mine. My name comes off the lease at the end of this month. After the first of the month, it is yours alone if you want it. I took half the money in the account. I want the credit card paid off and canceled. I don't plan on this getting nasty mainly because I don't want to see your lying, skanky, stinky butt again. I took a deep breath. I had to calm down as I was starting to repeat myself. Tell your boy toy to stay away from me. I know he was just taking something that was easily given up, so I am not going to go hunting him. If he crosses my path though, I will put him down. Not because you are worth my time, just because a real man doesn't go hunting after married woman. Someone needs to teach him a lesson, and if he crosses my path, I will gladly show him. If it's not me, then it will be the husband of the next married woman he decides to bang. She winced at my tone. Too bad. I grabbed the bags I had packed and brushed by her. I am picking up the stuff that has tape on it tomorrow while you are at work. If you want to fight it, take the tape off and I will list it in the divorce documents for the judge to let him decide. I said as I walked out the door. She didn't fight the divorce at all. When Mom died, I put all the money from the sale of her house and other goods into a trust. My accountant told me that as long as the trust held all my money, it wouldn't count toward my net worth for student aid. She also suggested I invest the money, so it wasn't just sitting there. Turns out she was wrong. Money held in trust does count toward financial aid. At least the way she set mine up it did. She was out of business after a year. Yet another example of women being dumb bitches. Since I had all the trust monies tied up in investments, it was quicker to take some student loans. Thanks to her inept device, I ended up with about 13 grand of student debt. Thankfully, my company had a program that paid $5,000 a year toward student loans. I was going to be okay. The net effect of that disastrous relationship with my accountant was positive overall though. While the trust didn't shield me from student aid, it did shield me from the divorce since I had never gotten around to naming Gwen as a trustee. There was about $600,000 in there that the bitch couldn't touch. I moved out of the apartment and found a small furnished loft close to work. I wanted nothing to do with the bitch, so I left it all to my lawyer. There was some discussion over my 401k, and to make things easier and shorter, I ended up cutting her a check for $15,000 and walked away. The reason she didn't ask for any support became apparent after all the dust had settled. The dumb bitch had got herself knocked up and was planning a summer wedding. I guess all that whining about not wanting to be tied down was just bullshit. For the next year, I threw myself into my job and was rewarded with a new position. I was now the improvement assessment coordinator for the entire company. We had bought out a number of smaller companies, and it was my job to make them more efficient. I was sent all over the country and tasked to bring the new companies in line. My nickname was the Machete Man, mainly because one of the first things I would do is cut the dead weight. Most of these companies had employees who had been there 10 or 15 years and were not pulling their weight. I would give them one chance to get it in gear, and if they didn't, they were gone. I found that generally the employees who had been there less than 10 years were willing to make the changes needed to keep their jobs. I knew that I didn't target the more senior employees, but ended up with a reputation for coming in and cutting senior staff. I was considered a pariah by both management and hourly staff, and I didn't give a shit. I wasn't there to make friends, I was there to make the company money. The bills weren't gonna get paid by rainbows and butterflies. As for my love life, the first year I was turned off by women. I hadn't found a single woman who was worth a shit in my life, so why bother trying to wine and dine them? The second year after my divorce, I felt the need to get laid. I had a lot of money and was traveling quite a bit, so I figured I would help support the world's oldest profession. What was that quote? You don't pay a hooker for sex, you pay her to leave. That summed my life up perfectly. I would cruise into town, do my business, and on the last day, I would either pick up a higher-end call girl or use a discreet escort service. The sex was usually top-notch, and we both knew where the other stood. I should have been doing this all along. Screw that relationship shit. I had no clue what the bitch I had married was up to, nor did I really care. I guess this is where I should say I went to counseling and worked through my issues with Gwen and women in general. No, I think counseling is great for those that can use it, but I really had no desire to change. I was getting a variety of no-strings-attached sex. I was keeping most of my paycheck and had found something I really loved, restoring old motorcycles. I had long since moved an hour away and bought a nice big house on the outskirts of a small town. It had a huge pole building, and in it was an old 1969 Triumph Bonneville. I had stipulated that the garage be cleaned out prior to close, but apparently the old owner was too busy to do it, so according to the language of the purchase agreement, I owned everything that was in the pole building at the time of possession. The old bike was partially torn apart, but I fell in love with the lines. I have always been good with my hands, so I bought an expensive set of Mac tools and went to work. I had the bike 75% restored when the owner tried to come and get it from me. We went around and around, but the basic fact was that he gave it up by not getting it out and it was mine. I gave him $500 to sign the title over to me. It was easier than fighting it out in court. After that was done, I came across a 1963 BSA Gold Star Spitfire that needed some attention. I was hooked. I wasn't a professional by any means, but I was getting a lot better. I was supposed to sell a bike and then buy a new project bike, but that didn't seem to happen. I ended up with a nice collection of restored vintage motorcycles. So here I was divorced for 7 years, plenty of money in the bank, a job I was good at, a rewarding hobby, and all the sex I could pay for. I was pretty damn content. Right up until I came home with a new throttle cable for my latest purchase and found an old beat-up Toyota sedan sitting in my driveway. As I pulled around it, I saw a woman get out of the car. I hopped out and was pretty much face-to-face with my ex-bitch of a wife. Jules, if there was any way to avoid it, you would have never seen me again. I did you wrong, and while I feel terrible about it, I can't go back and change it as much as I would like to. But this isn't for me. It's for my daughter, our daughter, she said in a rush. She handed me a photo of a cute little girl with a big smile who was missing a couple of baby teeth. It looked like the photo was taken at a mall or something. She was adorable. She's a cutie. Shame her mom is such a bitch. Now what are you trying pull with saying she is mine? Hell, as much as you were screwing around towards the end of our marriage, it could be anybody. I heard the Fifth Fleet was in town around that time, I replied. She sighed. Julian, take all the shots you want at me. I know I screwed up royally. I was a real shitty person and deserve anything you want to say me. But our daughter has leukemia and needs a bone marrow donor. I am not being overly dramatic when I say that she will die without it. Every other option has been exhausted. She is on a donor list, but it could take years, and she only has months. As for how I know she is yours, Jeremy is sterile, and you were the only person I had sex with other than him. Go ahead and hate me. Most of the time I hate myself. If you want to drag me inside and take a few swings at me, go for it. But please, please, please go get yourself tested to see if you match. She was crying by this point. I was unimpressed. So you want me to go through an invasive procedure to help a daughter who may or may not be mine and has been raised by another man? A man who was there for her first steps, her first words, her first lost tooth. Moments I missed because you couldn't figure out whose fire hose was in your holes at what time? Have you told her about me? Would this little girl even be able to pick me out of a lineup? Even if I was the sperm donor, you can't call me her father. That title belongs to the man who was there for her. By the way, where is the little cuck? I figured you guys must be in love as fast as you got married after stabbing me in the back, I replied. I noticed she got a sad look on her face. Jeremy left us when he found out he wasn't her biological father. His parents bullied him into a test, and it came back with no markers in common. It turns out he is sterile and probably has been all his life. I don't miss him one bit, but it tears my heart out and pisses me off that he just left Laura sitting in a hospital bed crying and has never returned. You are right. He is the only father she has known. It hurt her so bad to be abandoned like that. So, there is a measure of revenge for you. I am a divorced single mother living on welfare and trying to help a chronically ill child, she said. Look, she continued. My life has gone to hell the last 2 years. Believe me when I say that any revenge you could wish upon me has come full circle. The only good thing that has happened to me since we broke up is Laura. If you want to know any more, you will have to make an appointment to get tested. Here is the contact information along with a couple other pictures of Laura. Please, Jules, get tested. She sobbed as she turned and ran back to her car. Her departure was a bit delayed as it took 3 tries to get the engine to turn over. When she pulled out, I saw drops of oil on my driveway. As I went to get the cat litter to soak it up, I thought long and hard about her request. I'm an a-hole and I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I'm not the type to let a kid possibly die if I can help it. Even if turns out she wasn't mine, no 7-year-old should be in her position. I was rather surprised how quickly I had decided to get tested. I went in and made the call. It turned out that she was right. Laura was my biological child. The test also determined that I was a close enough match that they would risk the bone marrow procedure. I went and scheduled everything without telling Gwen. I had a PIR office used to run a background check on Gwen, A-hole, and A-hole's parents. Turns out everything she had told me seemed to be true. Shithead left her high and dry, even going so far as to get the marriage annulled. For the past 2 years, Gwen had been scraping by on assistance and waitressing jobs. Apparently, all her time was spent in hospitals. The medical costs were extensive even with Medicaid. All in all, things were pretty grim for both her and Laura. I decided to sell my bike collection to free up the cash needed for the medical bills, along with the back child support I knew I was going to pay. It was funny, I had rebuffed all offers to sell my bikes, but when I found out I had a daughter, the decision was simple. I went to the HR manager and surprised the hell out of her by taking 4 weeks off and asking to add my daughter to my insurance policy. I could tell she wanted the whole story, but she was one of those bitches that would tell everyone in the world about everything that happened in her office. I was particularly quiet when dealing with her. I showed up at the hospital with a bunch of papers for Gwen to sign in one hand and the biggest teddy bear I could find in the other. My heart almost broke when I saw the little figure with no hair and a bunch of tubes running in and out of her body. I had to choke back tears when she opened her eyes and smiled at me. I could feel my entire world shift at that point. I knew I would protect this little girl from anything or anyone who wanted to harm her. I ignored Gwen as she tried to hug me and went up to the hospital bed. "Hey," was all I could come up with. "Hello, I'm Laura. Mom tells me you are my real daddy," she replied. "Yeah, turns out I might be able to help you get better." "I brought you a bear," I said. Her eyes got real big and she reached out as far as she could for it. Her big smile got even bigger. She took it from me and gave it a great big hug. "Thank you so much. What's his name?" she asked. "It was a frickin' stuffed animal. Why did it need a name?" "Well, they said that you would know what it is when you picked him up," was my clever response. "It's Charlie," she said definitively. "Hello, Charlie. Thank you for coming to keep me company," she addressed the bear. "Thank you for bringing Charlie to me, Julian," she said to me. I was gonna lose it right there. If you were to put me in the position that little girl was in, I would have been howling in anger and despair. Instead, she was thankful for a dumb stuffed toy. I turned my head a bit and caught a glimpse of Gwen. There was a look of fierce pride for her daughter. My estimation of Gwen, the mother, went up greatly. To keep shit together like she has and still have raised this little angel was amazing. She was still a shitty wife. Laura had drifted back to sleep, but she was holding on to that teddy bear as tight as she could. This transplant shit had better work. I knew if it was in my power to make anything happen, I would. I nodded to Gwen, and we went down to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. I slid the papers to her. "Here is the paperwork to get her added to my insurance. I will have a $1,500 deductible, and then everything is paid for." Thankfully, they haven't rescinded the existing conditions rider to the healthcare system yet, so she will be okay. I have also gone and had them start sending me the bills for her healthcare. I should be able to get everything paid off within a couple months, I told her. I wasn't about to tell her that I had 50 grand from my bike sales sitting around waiting to be spent. It was amazing to see the tension drain from her body. For a brief moment, she looked like the woman I remembered. I hadn't realized how much weight she was carrying. "Thank you, Julian, for everything. I know you have every right to hate me, but thank you for doing it for her," she replied with her eyes full of tears. "It's what I would have done if I had known, Gwen. I had our company PI do a background check on you and the a-hole. By all accounts, you have been an outstanding mother. I will be punishing the a-hole soon enough for neglecting my daughter. But don't think that I have forgotten how you decided to throw away our marriage for a little bit of fun. Don't for a minute think I won't hold you responsible for my missing her first words, her first steps, or her first bike ride. You might be a great mother, but you were a really shitty wife." I told her. She had dropped her head down and I could hear the sniffles. Years ago, those would have broken my heart, but now they had no effect on me. I slid another packet of papers across to her. "This is a preliminary custody agreement," I said, causing her head to snap up. "I am not going to take her away from you, but I want to be part of her life. I am proposing getting her every weekend and 1 month during the summer with alternating holidays. Pretty standard stuff. Look it over, and we can discuss any changes. I am going to need copies of her birth certificate and whatnot. Do you happen to have them on you?" She looked at me, seeming to search my face for something, but I don't know what. Then she cast her eyes down. "I will have to get them for you. My car died on me, so I took the bus here this morning. I will bring them with me tomorrow," she said softly. My stomach rumbled. It was time for lunch, and I needed those documents soon. "Let's go get something to eat that isn't hospital food while she is sleeping, and we can pick up what we need afterwards," I suggested. She nodded and wiped her eyes. Great. I was going to spend my lunch with a crying woman. How did I get myself into this mess? Lunch was interesting to say the least. For 20 minutes we sat looking at each other, the silence only broken by us telling the waitress our order. For so long I wanted to rip into this woman, and my mind pulled out every nasty thing I could think of to throw at her, but I couldn't do it. I took a deep breath and analyzed why. It came down to the fact that I was going to have to deal with this woman for the foreseeable future, along with the realization that she was beaten. Outside of her relationship with her daughter, she had nothing. She made her choices and was living with the consequences. My sense of justice, as warped as it may be, was satisfied. I still didn't trust her or particularly like her at this point, but I wasn't going to hate her anymore. I'm not going to hit you, I said as the thought popped into my head. She flinched and gave me a funny look. When you first approached me, you said I could take a few swings at you. I am not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to try very hard to drop my animosity and anger toward you. We have a daughter, and I'm not going to poison her life like my parents poisoned mine. You'll probably never be my favorite person, but I'd rather let go of my anger and make sure that our daughter has a loving and stable home, I explained further. Some of the tension eased out of her. I know you wouldn't hit me, Julian, although I feel I deserve it. I just want you to know. She started. Stop, I said a bit too loudly. I don't want to hear your apology. Nothing you can say will make what you did and how you did it okay. The most basic truth of the matter is you didn't want to be married to me, and you wanted to screw around like you were single. You could have told me you wanted a divorce, but instead you went behind my back and drilled with your little boy toy, then came home and acted like nothing was wrong. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated action. You are not the victim, and you will receive no sympathy from me for how your life turned out. If we didn't have a daughter together, I would never have wanted to see you again. But we do have a child, and I am going to make damn sure that she has the best life I can give her. That includes a mother and a father. So let's eat and talk about how we are going to make that little girl's life better. She looked down at her burger and then back up at me. For the next 20 minutes, we had a great conversation about Laura and how we were going to attack the cancer. It was actually relatively pleasant. The area where they lived was rough to say the least. I knew they lived in government-assisted housing, but I didn't realize how bad things were in that part of town. I parked my truck and let Gwen hop out to go get the stuff. There were 3 guys hanging by the entrance to her apartment building, all with their pants down around their knees. I was staying by my truck in this neighborhood. She was gone for about 15 minutes when she came out and walked past the gangbangers. That was such a dumb look. I got out of my truck when they went to surround her. Hey Chicana, you too pretty to be living all alone around here. You need a man to take of you, don't you? The idiot said as he walked into her space. My heart was racing as I pulled my gun from its waistband holster. My .357 had been replaced by a Glock 19. I know a lot of people feel that a .40 cal is the superior cartridge, but I do a lot of shooting and the 9mm rounds are cheap. Let's face it, I was never going to get in a gunfight anyways. At least that's what I thought until a few minutes ago. Now I wasn't so sure. She already has a man looking out for her. So why don't you move out of the way before I drop you all like a bad habit? My voice may have been a bit shaky, but my gun held steady on the leader. The kid turned around and Gwen made a break for the truck. He went to reach into his waistband, but thought better of it when he saw I had him dead to rights. I noticed the 2 behind him were scared, but the leader himself just stared at me with cold eyes. If you reach for that piece, I will put you down. And it will just be a scared man defending his friend against all the spics that are coming up here and taking our jobs. They will probably give me a medal for shooting you 3. So let's just calm down and let me and the wife get to the truck and get out of here. Then you can go back to killing each other for whatever reason you want, I said as I started moving backwards while hold the gun steady on the bad guy. I managed to get back in and get seated all the while holding him in place with my gun. I turned on the key and shifted into drive before I broke eye contact. I gunned it and heard 3 loud pops before I managed to turn a corner and get going. I ran the next 2 lights and got on the freeway as fast as I could. After about 15 minutes, I figured no one was following me and slowed down. My heart was racing. Gwen was sobbing in the passenger seat next to me. You are not bringing my daughter back to that shithole, I growled. What do you have in that apartment that you need to get? Just our clothes and some dishes and stuff, she replied as she got control of her emotions. A lot of our stuff is still in the storage unit, but I am probably going to lose that here in the next month. I will buy you new clothes and I will get her new toys, I said. We'll get your stuff out of storage and you'll move into my place for now. I have a 4-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms. You will take one, Laura will take the other. You will be handling the cooking and cleaning until you can find a job to get back on your feet. You won't bring any boyfriends to the house and I won't bring any girlfriends. I'm gone about once a month checking on various plants and whatnot. My house is not going to be your sex paradise. Get a room or bang at his place. I am dead serious on this. If I find out you are bringing guys over to the house, I'll toss your butt out and go for full custody of Laura. She looked at me and then at the floor. I'm not seeing anyone, Jules. I haven't had the time or desire for the past 3 years. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So don't worry about that. And thank you. I know you want me around you like you want a hole in the head, but it will be nice to have a safe place to go to, she said quietly. You should thank Carlos, I responded. Carlos was my best friend growing up. We made an odd pair with me being a low rent, white trash nobody, and him being an adopted Hispanic rich boy with 2 geriatric white parents. We did everything together until he got sick when he was 16. Then I would visit him at the hospital every chance I could and watch him waste away as the cancer ate him from the inside out. He died 2 days before his 18th birthday. Mr. and Mrs. Jackson would pass on 3 years later. There wasn't a day that went by where I didn't envy my friend for the love and support he had from his 2 parents. I wanted to give my daughter that. It was too late for me to become a normal, well-adjusted adult. If I could give that feeling of love and support to my daughter, then I could suck it up and live with the bitch wife for a little bit. We got her stuff out of storage and had her set up in the spare bedroom within the next couple days. I might have gone a little overboard with the decoration for Laura's room, but hey, she was my only daughter. Within the next few days, I prepared myself for the procedure. I don't like hospitals, and I am sure that the nurses that were assigned to me were deliberately using the most blunt needles they could find, but I made it through. All total, it took a week. Little Laura rallied for a month, then it was found out that it didn't take. So I was out for another week as they tried again. Again, it didn't take, although there was enough positive response that the doctors were willing to try a third time. Finally, it took. For months after the last treatment, I welcomed Laura to her new home. This is where I tell the story of how Gwen and I fell back in love. Nope, didn't happen. I know it is probably weird, but I thought of Gwen as 2 separate people. There was the mother, a Gwen who could be a warm, loving, supportive, and patient. That was the Gwen that took care not only of Laura, but also of me. Laura had missed so much time from school that we decided to homeschool her for a bit to get her up to speed. Gwen kicked butt at all that as she started teaching Laura and still kept the house clean and dinner on the table. Then there was Gwen the wife. I could never forget how badly she hurt me. Gwen the wife was the one who cheated on me and kept the fact that I had a daughter from me. Every time I started thinking that maybe Gwen was okay, the anger would return. It sucked because I could tell Gwen felt bad about how things turned out, but I was in no mood to hear anything that hinted of an apology. After using all my sick time, I returned to work. My first day back about killed me as I missed my daughter so much. As I walked out the door, I was suddenly very angry and jealous that Gwen would get to spend time with our daughter, and I would have to go to work. The anger built every time I left. I used that to get particularly ruthless when it came to cutting expenses at my next project. The boss would have been happy with a 7 to 12% reduction of expenses. I was able to push things to a projected 16% reduction by cutting employee benefits and laying off some of the higher seniority people. I didn't just cut hourly guys though. The plant was top-heavy with managers, and by the time I was done, 3 were handed their walking papers. I could tell that the plant manager was glad to see me go. I didn't get a flight out of the town I was in until the next day, so I went to the 2-star airport hotel where I was staying and hung out at the bar downstairs. I never stayed at fancy places when I traveled. It looked bad enough, me coming in and canning people to cut overhead. Imagine how it would look if I was staying at the swankiest hotel while doing it. As I sit there and drank my overpriced, watered-down glass of scotch, I saw an attractive brunette walk in. I had danced this dance before, and I knew she probably struck out at a couple of clubs uptown. She was probably trolling down here trying to salvage the night. Thankfully, I was horny and had enough money to cover her price for the night. We made small talk and danced around the subject of pricing. I took her up to my room after leaving my wallet and valuables with the front desk clerk. The room had a safe, but all it took was for her to have a gun or a knife, and I would be opening the safe and giving her what she wanted. She was professional enough to text her time and location to someone, whether it was a friend or a pimp. We got in and I set $400 on the nightstand. He looked at me funny. All our conversation had thrown the number 300 around. It's been almost 6 months, so I would hope you would be willing to spend a little extra time talking to me tonight, I said with grin. In response, she slid her dress down and revealed a black lace bra and panty set. Not to say a lot, but she was good at sex. Didn't really say a lot, and did her job pretty damn good. It took a good 20 minutes, but I finally felt my body tighten up as I filled the rubber. She slid out from underneath me and started getting dressed. She checked her makeup in the mirror and fixed her hair a bit, then took the money off the nightstand and wished me well. I got the rubber taken care of, then hit the sack. I slept the sleep of the dead. The following morning, as I sat in my cramped coach seat, I thought back to last night's rendezvous. It was good, no doubt about it. I have had a lot of paid for girls, and she ranked right up there. But something was off. I decided not to think about it too much, and as the plane touched down, I was thinking of what I could get Laura. My little girl had adjusted well, and she was going to be ready to go to 2nd grade this fall. I made sure that Gwen had enough money to buy her any clothes or toys she needed. Was she too young for one of those new tablets that you could draw on? And what about a cell phone? She was going to be 9 years old. Do 9-year-olds need a cell phone? I would have to ask some friends. Who was I kidding? I had no friends. My assistant had kids. Maybe she would know. I picked out a stuffed frog from the airport gift shop for my little girl. I was loving this new dad gig. When I arrived home, the smell of dinner cooking was divine. But even better was the squeal and big hug I got from my daughter. She had a new dress and a ribbon tying up her hair. Mom bought me a new dress so I could look pretty for you when you got home. She also says I have enough hair that I got a new haircut. Do you like it, Daddy? She asked. I couldn't help it. I got a huge case of the feels and my eyes started tearing up. This little girl was what I was missing in my life. You are absolutely beautiful, honey. That dress is really pretty and your new haircut makes you look like you're a princess. I responded as I gave her a big hug and a kiss. I have something for you, I continued as I opened the store bag and brought out the frog. The woman at the counter said this guy needed a name and I knew you would have the perfect one for him. She almost squealed in delight and looked at him for a few seconds. It's Randy. Hi Randy, I am going to introduce you to Charlie the bear. You guys are going to be good friends, she said to the toy. She started heading to her room, then turned around and gave me another big hug. Thanks, Dad. That little girl was great. I looked at her mom, who also had tears in her eyes. I almost lost my good feeling as I realized that Gwen had kept this from me. I could have had this all the time for the past 8 years. I stamped that thought down. My mother was a bitter bitch about life, and I was not going to let the bitterness I had for Gwen poison my relationship with my daughter. I pasted a smile on my face. Gwen must have sensed my mood swing because she all of a sudden became very subdued. I put a fake smile on my face. Dinner smells good, I tried to say in a normal voice. Thanks, Julian. I found my old batch of recipes and tried to get the chicken parmesan just how you like it, she replied. This was going to be a treat as her chicken parm was to die for. I'm sure it will be, I responded with unfeigned enthusiasm. She was doing her best to present as normal a home life as possible for Laura's sake. I could do the same. Besides, I had to admit it was nice having my clothes taken care of and the house cleaned. My daughter and her mother had been with me about 3 months at this point. Laura was such a treat, and if I had to put up with Gwen, I could do that. I didn't want her to leave because I knew she would take Laura. I had talked about getting primary custody of my daughter, but my lawyer pointed out that with my work schedule and general lack of parenting experience, it was going to be a long uphill fight. Also, a girl needs her mother. It was about a year after they moved in and Laura had gone back to regular school. Gwen had done a great job teaching her not only the needed facts but also how to study and pay attention, and she was constantly on the honor roll. I was living in High Cotton. I was getting my ashes hauled once or twice a month on my out-of-town trips. My house was clean and my clothes were taken care of. Dinner was on the table and my little girl was the apple of my eye. Gwen and I had settled into a comfortable existence. She was coming out of her shell. She shocked me by asking if she could use the car to try and get a job. I had bought a newer used Subaru wagon for her to shuttle Laura around in and pick up groceries and whatnot. It ran good and had a great safety rating. Gwen, as far as I am concerned, that car is yours. I will never use it if you move out, and it is old enough the resale value will be nothing. Why don't I just go put the title in your name? If something happens to me, I have it set up where everything goes to Laura. It will be held in trust until she turns 18, then she can do whatever she likes. You should have a car to help her out until she's able to get around by herself, I replied. I could see her start to tear up. Thank you, Julian. You have been so good to us and I am not sure why. You have to know by now that I wouldn't stop you from seeing Laura even if I could. And child support wouldn't be much more than what you are paying for the two of us to be here. Why are you being so nice to us, or rather me? She asked. I thought about how I wanted to word this. This was also the first time I realized that I wasn't angry at her anymore. Before I had been holding it back, trying to not let it show for Laura's sake, but now I really had no animosity for her. I let out a big breath and gathered my thoughts. My mother poisoned me, and my sister with her vitriol and hate. I didn't want to pass that on to Laura, so I stamped it down. Make no mistake, if Laura hadn't come into my life, I would probably have hated you right up until the day I died. But it's different now. The short answer to your question is that Laura likes you, so I like you. I think we can go forward being friendly if not friends. I replied. The tears started up in force and she walked over and gave me a hug. For some reason my allergies started acting up and my eyes were watery also. It felt good to let go of the anger and hurt. Don't get me wrong, there was still resentment, but it wasn't at the forefront anymore. Laura came down to the kitchen and saw us hugging and crying. She decided she needed to get in on the hugging action, and the three of us held each other for a long time. Epilogue. My heart was about bursting with pride when my daughter crossed the stage to get her diploma. Gwen was sitting next to me holding my hand and had tears in her eyes. Laura had gotten into Harvard and was going to leave us in a couple months. It was all she could talk about. Thankfully, she had gotten some scholarships, so her education fund would cover the rest. I didn't want to tell my girl she couldn't go to her school of choice, but I wasn't sure I could swing full tuition to an Ivy League school. As for the hand-holding with my ex-wife, she had gotten a job and moved out of the house about 6 months after we had talked. We finally sat down and she explained as best she could what drove her to leave me. It was a combination of us being away from our friends and family, along with a bunch of new friends that made her long for her carefree days. Shithead saw that and got into her pants. Once that happened, she decided she wanted the single life again since she knew I would drop her when I found out. She only married him because she was pregnant, and she was scared of being a single mom. He only married her because his parents bullied him into taking responsibility. She claims she never even thought that Laura wasn't his until the test. I am thinking she is living in denial about that one, but I'm not making a big deal about it. As for the shithead, sometimes karma serves up a nice softball that you can just belt out of the park. Our company bought his company out. Guess who they sent in to check productivity? It gets even better. Shithead's father had worked at the company for 19 years and gotten his little guy into the job. Both father and son were handed their walking papers along with 10 other employees. They didn't make the connection for about a month, and then we got all types of threatening calls and emails. My decisions had been backed up by my past practice and performance reviews. They sued my company, but we just dragged it out long enough that their attorney got tired of waiting for his money. Shithead shouldn't have treated my daughter so poorly on his way out, and Shithead's father should never have called my daughter a mistake. Speaking of mistakes, I might have made a biggie last night. Gwen was feeling sad about Laura leaving and came over to talk. We were good friends by this point and looked out for each other. She had dated a little and found what she thought was a decent guy. Turns out he was married. I helped her pack his shit and dropped it off at his house to a surprised wife. We got to talking and flirting, and the next thing I know I have her bent over the couch and she is begging me to go harder and deeper. I could have lived with that. A one-time lonely quickie between two people who share a lot of history. No, where I may have made a mistake is inviting her to stay the night and making love to her for 2 hours before we went to sleep. All types of questions are going through my head right now. Today, though, is about my Laura. Tomorrow? I guess we'll see. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.